I realized who the troll was. His name is Dave.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive through any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey everybody, welcome to Intellectual Dollar Tree. This is the flagship podcast of a hype train starting before either of our faces are even on stream. You can support this project by doing what the people in the chat are currently doing, or by going to echoplexmedia.com, clicking the support tab. You can find all different kinds of ways to support us there. I'm producer Dave, and you can find me dancing on Henry Kissinger's grave and then pissing on it.
I am HK Perrin. You can find me on Mastodon at hperrin@port87.social, and you can find me on email at hperrin@port87.com.
Fantastic. Unfortunately, you can also be found on the Intellectual Dollar Tree. And everybody, somebody who's very much not dead yet is Peter Thiel. And we haven't checked in on Peter Thiel in a while. So this is Peter Thiel on something called the Pirate Wires. They have less YouTube followers than we have Twitch followers, which is interesting. He's talking about the diversity myth, corrupt institutions, woke capital, loss of religion, and China. So this is an hour long. We might get through the whole thing tonight between the regular show and the post game, but usually me and HK do have a lot to say when Peter Thiel has anything to say. So we could be here. We could also be here for a while if we cover this whole thing. So let's let it rip. Thanks for joining us, and I'm sorry.
Smartest people in the world are the physicists, and they're just going to build bombs to blow up the world. Maybe it's better if they spend their lives puttering around with DEI grants and diversity. It sort of seems kind of pathetic.
What the fuck?
But at least they're not going to blow up the world.
You and I met 15 years ago now, and back then...
15 years? What was this guy, 10?
After the first meeting, I went and I bought your book. I read the whole thing, cover to cover, The Diversity Myth, and tried to...
He's got 5 o'clock shadow, so he's like at least 17.
I think it's very funny now looking back. You didn't want to talk about...
You can go look at the board of Peter Thiel, not of Founders Fund, but of his boutique capital fund. You'll see that they're all twinks.
Was my sense. And
Except for Eric.
Silly for having brought it up. You just seemed completely over it. Is
Eric on the board? I don't think he's on the board.
When this was happening.
He's the managing director.
That's not a board position.
We should talk about corporate structure. We're okay. Like fucking a minute into this video, and I'm already trying not to get bogged down in the corporate structure of Peter Thiel's boutique fucking capital fund.
And my sense was that you thought everything that you had written about maybe just didn't really pan out. Maybe a year after I started at Founders Fund, 2012, let's say. early.
I like how this guy's got a projector turned on, but it's just to put like a blue square on his wall. Did you see that?
You had written about
Watch.
were there
Really?
again.
Watch.
And by 2015, I would say wokeness or DEI, whatever we're going to call it, had pretty much taken over every single institution in the country, which makes the diversity myth, I think.
Oh, look, he's showing off his books too, but in a mirror. Or is that a window into the next room?
Knowledge, the only.
I'm hoping those are dirty magazines and that's his masturbatorium. That would be the
And so
best
here we are today,
situation.
They could be VHS. He could be older than he looks.
30 years later, to do a kind of retrospective on that work. And maybe
The
have a
worst
conversation
situation would be that he's
back
trying to
15
look
years
like
ago
an
when I first asked
intellectual.
you about it.
You know, I was in college, late 80s, early 90s, was involved in all these campus wars, culture wars. Some of them seemed to be just these crazy people doing silly things. Some of them seemed to involve cosmic battles. There was a big battle in the late 80s at Stanford University over the core Western culture program. This rally, hey, hey, ho, ho, Western culture's got to go. And there was in some ways a debate about this one mandatory class that all freshmen had to take.
So what kind of things would people be protesting in the 80s at Stanford?
The behavior of one Mr. Henry Kissinger? No, I'm assuming it was the kind of stuff. It would be like it was probably actually the sort of beginning of campuses being more friendly to gay people. That seems
Yes.
like the right time frame.
I was thinking in particular gay rights.
Well, Peter Thiel
and
wants
what
gay rights,
exactly
but only
happened to that?
he only wants gay rights for himself. HK.
What exactly happened to that movement that kind of, I'm assuming, started in like those kind of younger circles, like universities, maybe like the music scene, places where generally there are a lot of younger people. What kind of happened to that?
Those people grew up and they legalized gay marriage.
Yep, exactly. And who in the frame of this video that we're watching benefited from that?
One or both of the participants.
Yeah. And what are they doing right now?
Complaining about it.
Yanking up that ladder.
That's all right. I'll climb the side of the building and then throw Peter Thiel off of it in Minecraft.
Bigger debate about our whole civilization had to be, thrown out. And then, my friend David Sachs and I published this book, The Diversity Myth, back in 1995.
Whoa, that David Sachs guy's been a giant piece of shit since I was 18 years old. I didn't know that.
We're out of college and sort of synthesizing a lot of these kinds of arguments. It's all focused on happenings at Stanford, and you have to make some kind of argument that what you're talking about matters to other people, to the whole country. And the somewhat contrived argument we made was that, ideas have consequences, that what happens at these elite colleges will eventually spread into the broader society. It was a somewhat contrived argument, and probably by the time we met in 2008, it already felt, wow, it was just an embarrassment in a way where I sort of turned molehill into a mountain or something like that. And certainly even 4 or 5 years after I wrote the book, 1999, 2000, during the PayPal years, it was just not an item. It was not something anybody ever asked me about. I was never asked to explain things.
I think maybe nobody read it. I'm guessing his book wasn't exactly the most popular thing in the world.
I was never asked to explain my past as sort of a right-wing campus libertarian type person. The vibe of the 1999.com internet was profoundly apolitical, optimistic.
What? The internet in 1999 was apolitical?
Excuse me, was he on a different internet than I was?
There was like fucking gay people everywhere, just all out being gay because they were on the internet and they could just gay the whole place up, or at least that was my experience. There were fucking furries
was extremely
everywhere.
political from the beginning.
The furries kind of ran the place, for fuck's sake. It ain't nothing political like the furries.
The computer scientists are a generally fairly political bunch.
Yeah, he was just
Certainly the
insulated
computer
from it.
scientists of the 80s and 90s were.
Yeah, he was just insulated from it, or he was just on the chans. No, those were political too.
Or he's just a moron.
This guy is
Do you
like,
think maybe he just has like incredibly bad memory and like he's viewing everything through his current lens of like, well, the past must have been, you know, what I perceive as better because that's what everyone says about the past.
or he felt that he was benefiting from the sort of rising tide of like social justice at that time because he was a closeted gay man who was like in a place where that was maybe no longer going to be necessary. And so there, back then that was apolitical because it was helping him.
Okay.
I don't know. I just don't think it was like apolitical at all. Like there was like they thought they were.
Yeah, no, it absolutely was not.
We all. I'm older than you. I was around to remember it. We thought we were going to fix the world. There was nothing more political than thinking you're going to fix the world.
I mean, that's like saying music is apolitical. Like he's just flat out wrong 100%.
Remember when the papers was apolitical? Yeah, it's like saying the printing press was apolitical, right? Like,
Yep.
And so incredibly disconnected from these crazed culture wars. And then, when you forward to the Silicon Valley of the last few years, you know, even though in some sense it's done so incredibly well as a financial or economic matter, the vibe is sort of angry, pessimistic, you know, endless culture wars.
maybe that's just because nobody likes you, that you feel that everything seems angry and pessimistic. They're like, fuck, Peter Thiel's here. Well, that seems a little angry and pessimistic, but that's just because you chose to show up at the dinner party, friend.
Also, notice he says like endless culture wars, but like, okay, so like they've never ended. Like there are always, quote, culture wars, unquote. I mean, eventually some of them turn into actual wars.
Right. I would also suggest that there's no beginning to what we call a culture war, or at least like, sure, there was a time before people, I suppose, but like as soon as like two people didn't agree on how to organize society, bam, you had the culture war, didn't you?
Yep. And it's never ended since then.
And it's not going to. There's times it kind of ebbs and flows where it's like more in the mind of the average person or less in the mind of the average person. Sure. The time he's talking about in the 90s, I think there was a time where it was less in everyone's mind than maybe it is now. But it just depends on who you're talking about. Because for like gay people in the 90s, the culture war was still being waged upon us.
There was literally a show called Politically Incorrect.
Yeah. Yeah, that
like clearly the culture wars were just as raging in the 90s as they were at any other time. Like I said, I think he's just a moron. Like I think Peter Thiel is just like incredibly stupid.
Right, he's basically good at turning $1 into 10 and that's it.
Yeah, he doesn't know anything about anything else.
Hyper political. Something like the diversity myth resonates in a very
This is what happens if you came up in the 80s and didn't do a lot of coke, all right?
way, and now feels prophetic. You know, I suppose I'm kind of proud that I wrote it. That I can say I was right about everything. Well, in some ways, you know, it would maybe I'd rather live in a world where, you know, I'd been less right about things. And then, of course, I think there probably are.
Oh, don't worry, dude. You are not right about anything in the real world.
Right? He was like, he wrote books about like. He wrote a book saying diversity is bad. Like, dude, you didn't fucking come up with that. I feel like the United States fought a civil war a couple hundred years before about that. Like,
yeah.
Wrong.
There's a question of terms, I think. Is it wokeness? Is it diversity? Is it DEI? What exactly are we talking about? I think it's important because one thing that happens again.
I feel like Peter Thiel would definitely be a segregationist. If he's not already. I've never heard him, you know, publicly say he's not a segregationist.
Trying to talk about this abstract thing that seems to be sort of pervasive. You're asked, well, is it even real? If you can't define it, does this even exist? It seems like, you've made it up. It is a mountain that you've made out of a molehill. There's nothing going on here.
Well, there's something very slippery about all the words. I think the late 80s, early 90s one was multiculturalism, which has probably gone a little bit out of fashion. It's more wokeness. Diversity feels like it's been
no one on the left says wokeness.
And like multiculturalism multiculturalism has not gone out of fashion. You ever been to a city?
Yeah.
Like, look at all the different restaurants, friend. What the fuck do you think that is? Like,
I think he means the term, though. And like, no, people still use the term multiculturalism. And people on the left generally don't use the term woke.
Like, I often use it to make fun of people who think they're making fun of me, right?
Yeah, like there is a certain subset of people on the left who use the term woke. Like it actually started in the black community, right?
Right. It just meant more or less, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but just aware of the societal structures that make it harder for black folks.
Yes, aware of systemic racism.
Right. The conspiracy. Then the conspiracy community ruined it. Actually, probably.
Yeah. What the right has turned it into, though, no one on the left uses it in that way. Like no one on the left sees like
I don't like these absolutes. It's very hard to find someone.
Yeah, very few people on the left use it in the way that they do.
I just think very few people, except for the people who are concerned about it from the other side. I think very few fucking conservatives really even talk about it. I think especially like 5 or 10 years ago, nobody was even talking about it. So I think it like is a creation. Like it is a caricature of something, but now it's not the thing that it's a caricature of. Like it doesn't exist in any sort of meaningful way throughout society the way it's been caricatured, I suppose, is a better way to talk about it.
It's like their current soup du jour. You know, every year or so they'll come up with some new phrase.
Don't put parsley on it. Parsley's too spicy.
that becomes their phrase that they complain about, and it always means the same thing. You know, it always means just like trying to include people other than white straight cis men.
Right. I mean, it, like you said, the Bill Maher show, politically incorrect. Like the political correctness was, again, just basically at that time it was like, don't be hella shitty to women.
Yep. Yeah.
That was like, if you saw a comedian complaining about political correctness in that era, they were just going to say, why can't I call you toots?
Yeah. And like, that's the same thing that they would call woke today.
Quasi-permanent word for 30 years. So it's probably not the worst one to focus on. But yes, there is something about the seeming slipperiness of it that's an important feature. And in some ways, one of the things that I think has helped...
Ooh, are they playing a game? Who's not going to touch their glass of water first? I love this game.
Well,
as soon as someone touches the glass of water, the projector turns red.
It's an ambiguous title, and you can think of it in one of two ways. If you put the stress on the word diversity, then there's this sort of natural critique that follows, where you don't have genuine diversity on a college campus if you have a group of people who look different but think alike. That diversity, intellectual diversity should mean more than hiring the extras from the space cantina scene in Star Wars or something.
What the fuck?
By think alike, what he means is none of them are racist.
People who look different but think alike. That diversity, intellectual diversity should mean more than hiring the extras from the space cantina scene in Star Wars or something like this. And this is sort of...
I think I know... Actually, I don't know what he means. It's probably fucking racist against like,
he means
different
allowing
aliens.
Yeah, he means allowing foreigners in.
And then this was sort of the idea, people talk about diversity all the time, but on a lot of important dimensions, they don't really...
He's saying specifically that diversity doesn't mean allowing foreigners in. Diversity means allowing racists in.
Well, I think that I think when they say diversity of thought, they oftentimes mean they want to be in a space where they think and say the things that they think and say, and then no one tells them to go fuck themselves.
Correct.
I think that's and that's been like a broad theme since the first fucking episode of the Intellectual Dollar Tree, honestly, is that you have diversity of thought everywhere. And then maybe, like my mom told me when I was 8, she said to me, you don't really have to say everything that you think. And these people hate my mom when I was 8, honestly.
They want to speak like a southern plantation owner in 1810.
I think that
and have the exact same consequences as a southern plantation owner in 1810.
I think somebody like Peter Thiel might not like that, but that would just be because the accent from the South, because he's also bigoted based on class, and he would think maybe the accent from the South means you're stupid. Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
But and I don't think that their ideas. I think their ideas are more accurately probably from the 80s. Like white, fairly well-to-do people from the 80s. I think that's like where because that's like when he came up, right? I think that's where his attitudes are from. I don't think they're from that far back. I don't legitimately think he would be for slavery or even like segregation. I think what he's saying is that sure, that we've desegregated society, and isn't that good enough for you?
I think he's a little racist. Not a little. I think he's fairly racist.
I don't know. I know that it wouldn't be tough to imply that he is from this. Sure. Not from this, but from other things. Not from this, but from other things. Because all he's doing here is complaining about, complaints about diversity. That's interesting too, because he doesn't mean that everybody, these spaces should just be all black, right? Because that's also not diverse.
I feel like what he's saying is code for racism.
Sure.
I mean,
like
maybe
I said,
it's not. Maybe I'm misreading. Maybe it's code for like transphobia instead.
Well, but like I said, when he doesn't think that these spaces should be all black, is what I'm saying, right? Because that would also not be diverse.
I think he's implying that it is fine if they are all white.
Wars or something.
Not implying. He's saying it's fine if they're all white.
This was sort of the idea. People talk about diversity all the time, but on a lot of important dimensions, they don't really have it. It's sort of a powerful internal critique. But then the second meaning puts the stress on the word myth, and under this meaning, diversity is it's a poorly defined word. It's something we tell stories about. It's a kind of shibboleth. It's a false god that we're worshiping.
Unlike the real God? That nobody worships diversity. People, this is dumb. Okay, first of all, the idea that it's a myth, it's not a myth. Go to any city. It's a diverse place. Shut the fuck up. Diversity exists. Any city. Just go. Anywhere. In the South, in the Northeast, in the West Coast, cities are diverse. Lots of different kinds of people, all mostly living together and not really paying too terribly much attention, actually, to what race everyone else is. That's how a city works, right? You're not wondering what I need dry cleaning. Where is specifically the Cambodian dry cleaner? That's not how diversity works, right? You're like, what's a good dry cleaner in my neighborhood? And then you just go there and they do your dry cleaning. And you don't really think, after you go in, you might notice that somebody isn't the same race as you, but after you go in, you fucking stop thinking about it immediately because you have other shit to do.
And because you passed, 15 other people that were a different race than you on the way there.
Maybe more.
So like if you're caught up about races in the city, like you're not going to get anything done.
Right. You're just going to be it's going to paralyze you.
Yep.
Diversion from things that are more important. And if we're sort of all encamped at the altar of the diversity God, what are we not paying attention to? And this is sort of where, I've described it as a kind of hypnotic performance or a magic show in which you're quasi-hypnotized and you can't pay attention to the,
what?
orange gorilla jumping up and down in the back of the stage or something like that. And maybe the question to ask is not sort of specifically where one is, where some of the pro or anti diversity arguments are correct, but what are the things it is distracting us from? What is it diverting our attention away from? Where is it redirecting?
This is another thing I don't like, and I talk about it more in the context of conspiracy theory stuff. But like he goes, "Oh, if you're thinking about diversity, you're not thinking about anything else." And it's like, how stupid does he think everybody is? Like,
I would assume as stupid as he is.
so how many things do you think that you forgot more things that you thought about today than you remember that you thought about, right?
Oh yeah, probably like at least like 100.
And
I would guess.
probably 300. You probably even forgot that you thought about 200 other things, right? So
Yeah.
so like this idea that like, oh well, everybody's focused on diversity and can't think of anything else. Like, well then why didn't everybody's house burn down because they fucking turned off their stove, you stupid motherfucker? Like, why is everybody's laundry still not in the dryer? Like like I know these are dumb examples, but I think sometimes giving a dumb example sort of like puts on Front Street how like sort of non-thoughtful somebody's words are. In this case, like if you does he think that there's just people in universities and institutions that are just pining away about diversity all day? Or do you think they have paperwork to do and maybe try to figure out where they're going for lunch and who they're going to lunch with and fucking...
There might be people whose job it is to consider diversity. And for them, like, maybe it's good that they, focus on diversity because that's their job. But yeah, for most people, it is not their job to focus on diversity. So yeah.
And to the extent...
But that doesn't mean you can't not think about it. Like, or you can't like think about, it doesn't mean that you can't think about it and other things. You could be a math professor and also think about diversity.
I mean, there's a diversity of numbers and equations. I can't wait for a math professor to come up and try to explain that to us, that actually the diversity in math is in the numbers and the equations. That's great. Okay. I can't wait for that because that is, well, that's true. It's, it's true and it's interesting. It's also stupid.
It's actually okay if the entire math department is white because we have lots of different numbers and that's diversity.
That's a set of questions that I've come to think are very important and that didn't even register when I wrote the book. So I think the specific arguments of the diversity myth, I stand by the vast majority of them. I think they were right. The people we argued against were wrong. But then there were all these ways where I think David Sachs and I were not even wrong. We sort of took these arguments at face value. We said these were the important debates, and we had no sense of this bigger map and how there were other things going on the map that were far more important.
Like at the beginning of the Civilization game where all you can see is the stuff around your fucking like horse and buggy or whatever the shit that is. That's how everybody thinks now. It's just like, but that's just diversity. Can't see the whole map. Just started the game.
I want to just sort of get right into basically what you got wrong, and this will be, I think, the premise of the entire discussion.
I'd say not even wrong.
Not even wrong, right? Not even aware of the question, the right question to ask maybe. But first, I mean, the book wasn't, just quickly, the premise of the book, it was not what was going on at the Stanford campus. That was sort of the background. What was the thesis of the diversity myth?
There was a fault line around this debate about the Western civilization.
Oh, yikes.
In which the multiculturalism, diversity arguments were that we needed to study other cultures and other countries. And then the argument we wanted to make was that it wasn't really sort of interested in diversity in that sense, but it was more, you still had all these authors that were writing in a Western tradition, but they were sort of anti-Western. So it wasn't non-Western, but anti-Western. So that was sort of a intellectual framing in terms of what was.
What's the problem with that? Like if you read writing that Peter Thiel might think is anti-West, whatever that means, well, maybe somebody sitting in a place that's been colonized might have some anti-Western sentiment based on the fucking history of their own society. Like, what's the problem
I'm really
with reading
confused
that?
about what he means by anti-Western.
I mean, he probably just means, if I had to guess, it was probably just stuff from people that aren't white and some maybe critiques of the United States and Europe in the 20th century is what I'm guessing.
Okay. Like anti-colonial.
Maybe, but who knows?
Okay.
That's the thing is, I think the reason this stuff is so slippery and so effective is that it kind of means what it needs to mean to whoever it needs to mean it for whenever it needs to mean it for them.
Yeah, because anti-Western isn't really a thing. That's like, there is no definition of that.
Right, because
It's
like people have to
if
travel
you're-
westward to get places all the time. So go west, young man.
I guess anti-Western is east.
And that's funny.
It's just a cardinal direction.
That's funny because what we call the East is actually, if you accept that the Earth is a globe and you want to travel the least distance to get to what we call the East, you have to actually go west from here.
That's true. Yeah.
Not about learning from other cultures, but it was about tearing our own culture and our own society and our own history down. There was this incredible intensity
though?
around identity
So
politics.
the thing he's looking for is critical. The thing he's looking for is critical theory. That's that HK. Hold on. The thing he's looking for is critical theory.
Yeah.
That's it. He's just looking. He can't find the words for it. He doesn't like critical theory. Critical theory is exactly what you think it is. It's like criticizing society. And that's, we do a version of that here, and obviously non-academic, but we do a version of that here, and he don't like it so much. Although what he's doing right now is critical theory too, because he's criticizing society. So I don't know. It's just, I guess it depends on who you're criticizing and why.
Yeah. So I've read literature about basically like these are the things that are wrong with the United States. And some of them go into these are the ways that we could fix them. Some of them don't. They just point out what's wrong. But I feel like his characterization of that kind of literature as wanting to tear down the West or tear down our society is, I would say, a gross misrepresentation at best. Pointing out the flaws in a society doesn't mean you want to tear it down. It means you see flaws in a society and want to fix them.
Or maybe
all
not.
societies have flaws, and fixing them shouldn't be controversial.
Well, you don't have to want to fix them to point them out. Like, that's also really interesting that he comes out of like a culture where people submit bug reports in code.
I don't know. Like, even that's like, if someone submits a bug report to one of my projects, I'm not going to respond to them by saying, quit trying to tear down my project.
Right. That's what I'm saying is he comes from a culture where that's how the porridge gets made or whatever is by people finding flaws in the thing. And so that somebody else can fix them. That's what GitHub is essentially for. I mean, it does, you put your code there and whatnot, but it's one of the things that GitHub is for is to find the flaws in software that even like lay people can find bugs and report them there.
And if someone submits a bug report and submits a fix for that, then I'm super appreciative. But I'm also appreciative of someone who just submits a bug report. Just says like, hey, there's something wrong with your software. When I do this, it crashes. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. I'll go fix that. I'm not like, quit trying to add diversity into my software.
Or you might have to ask for more information, right? Maybe they just go, this crashes, and you're like, hey, can you tell me, like, I need some information about your machine and what other software, you get as much information as you can. Maybe follow-up questions are good too, right?
Yes. Someone who just says this crashes isn't really helpful. And maybe that's what he's talking about. Maybe there's some author that I don't know of who wrote an entire book that essentially just says America is racist or something. But like all of the literature that I have read that talks about America being racist talks about like why and how America is racist. There's not really any book that I know of that is just that America is racist. You know what I mean?
And not for nothing, the thing that he's complaining about now that things have changed a little bit, he's just doing the same shit he was complaining about people doing in the 90s, right? Because now he's mad at society and telling you what's wrong with society. Like,
also, I do want to stress that like it is impossible to find a government or a society where no one has published criticisms of that government or society. Like even the governments that, any criticism of them is punished, still there are published works of criticism of those governments. Generally, the authors don't survive very long, but the works still exist.
politics, and there was already a lot of craziness about these questions of identity. There was always something paradoxical about the way the word, identity means two diametrically opposite things. Your identity can be that which makes you unique or different, or your identity can be that which makes you identical or the same. And then,
well, not the same, but wait, hold on. They're not the same. Being a part of a group does not take away your individuality. It's both. You are both an individual and part of many groups.
Does he think that like part of your identity equals your identity?
This is crazy town right here. My identity is not taken away from me when people find out that I'm gay, right? Because
correct.
I'm not the only gay guy walking the planet. That would suck. I wouldn't be fucking half of the East Bay right now. But more importantly, that doesn't take away from the fact that I'm one person, an individual who is going to be different in many ways from the people who share that identity with me. This is another thing that he probably hates is intersectionality, because there's an intersection of being gay and being a podcaster that should make it harder for me to get laid, but it doesn't.
In fact, both you and Peter Thiel are gay, correct?
We are part of. You've just taken away both of our individuality.
Would you say that you and Peter Thiel are identical?
No.
I would say you're nearly as far from identical as you could get.
I mean, we're both, in the same general age group, probably the same height, close to the same weight, and we're both white, but that's all. That intersectionality shit again. He probably hates, God damn it.
That's why I said nearly.
Nearly, yeah. It's absurd that you can't be an individual and part of a group. That's the idea of human synergy is that the individuals in a group can sometimes make the group more powerful or more effective than even the sum of its parts, right? We have concepts for this that are old concepts. Most of them are Western philosophy concepts, actually.
Have all the people in Group X, that their identities, that they're identical to the other people in Group X and somehow completely different from the people in Group Y. And then
wait, what?
That's sort of the paradoxical definition of identity politics, where you start with meaning both the same and different. If you start with a word that means A and not A, you can do a lot of mischief. And
wait, has he ever heard of a homonym?
If you start with a word that means A, not A, you can do a lot of mischief. What?
There are mischief is good, but there are just a lot of words. You ever read the dictionary? It's like definition A, definition B, definition C of this word.
Does he think that the gay rights movement was mischief?
We got up to some. People be throwing bricks.
Fair enough.
This guy's supposed to be really smart, and he's just not even. It just seems like he can't even understand words as far as the dictionary. You just find there's so many words that mean more than one thing, and you have to look at the context in which they're being used to find out what you mean by that word. That's why we have things called sentences, possibly even paragraphs. Otherwise, people would just communicate in single words. And the word would have to mean the same thing every time, or it would get real confusing real fast. Think about the word tree. It could mean a tree outside, or it could mean you got any tree, and I'd be actually, yes, I do. I got some last night.
It could also mean a data tree.
Yeah. Which is interesting because it's based off of the idea of a tree, but it's not a tree.
It's also always portrayed as being upside down, which has irked me a lot.
There are trees that grow downward into the water, though. They're not trees. I guess they're plants, but let's not do that part. Let's not do this one. Let's not do this one. I just really try my best to make sure that we're never even approaching the level of annoying pedantry as the people we're covering. All right. Look, it's hard. All right. It's hard.
There's a lot about, yes,
Hard like a tree.
paradoxes and insanity
soft.
of identity politics.
So you were pretty focused.
There were speech codes at Stanford where, there was sort of increasing restrictions on what you could say. There were sort of a lot of informal speech codes where people, for the most part, the speech codes were just the tip of the iceberg, and then people knew you weren't supposed to say things that you'd get in trouble.
Like what? Like if you, like, for example, if you tell somebody you want to fight them, like that's something you're not supposed to say, right? You're not supposed to challenge people to a fist fight, although they did it like a couple weeks ago in Congress. Like, yeah, we've always had, it's deep manners. Manners
as a concept that has already died.
Sure, I guess, but was it replaced with woke?
I think 4chan killed manners and replaced it with the Pepe meme.
Oh, we have Pepe back now.
Oh, okay, good.
We're focused on essentially the subject of what was happening, but you just
All these sort of campus wars.
you alluded to the fact that the real story was what.
Wait, the fucking square behind, the rectangle behind him turned green. Did you see that?
Paying attention to
What? No, I missed it. Can you go back?
What are they?
Oh, now it's blue. I think it just might be different cameras with different white balance. No, we're not going back.
Just a brief list before we take them apart. I think one by one.
Well, probably
I was kind of hoping he was slickly trying to put a rainbow up color by color during this as like a act of defiance, but that's not what's happening.
But 4 things that I would say are bigger than DEI, and that DEI today or even back then was is distracting us from. The first one would be that in a campus context, there's all this focus on the insanities and the humanities.
Oh, I saw it being
Somehow
green.
the sciences.
You're
were
definitely
more
right. That was green.
and on the one would be that in a campus context, there's all this focus on the insanities and the humanities, but somehow the sciences were more important. And
Wait, what?
the thesis I came to in the
What does he mean, the insanities and the humanities?
So I think by insanity, the insanities, quote unquote, I think he just means like studying other people's cultures.
Maybe, or maybe he's specifically talking about mental health. Maybe he's talking about psychology and psychiatry. Maybe he doesn't like those things. But because
I doubt that.
But he's kind of a piece of shit and would probably talk about psychology and psychiatry by just calling it the insanities, right? Like,
Yeah, but I doubt that's what he means. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
sense is that we have lived in an era of general stagnation in science and in much of technology.
oh, this shit again. God damn it. Just see our previous episodes on Peter Thiel. We're not doing this again. We're not doing this again. We're just not. I refuse. I fucking
Right,
refuse.
this guy thinks we haven't made any progress since 1980 on anything but computers.
He would, yeah, but I fucking refuse. I fucking refuse. We're not doing this again.
Outside of the computer context, and that in some ways all the craziness in the humanities served the administrators well because it stopped people from asking questions about the crown jewels, which were the sciences. And if the sciences were corrupt, this was in some ways a much bigger indictment of what's going on and a much bigger crisis for us to deal with. And these sort of intense campus wars were actually a very comfortable way to avoid this much bigger question about the sciences.
I would just love anybody to ask him, because we've sort of sussed out what he means, but we're not doing this. We're not going down this fucking rabbit hole. I refuse. I will turn off the fucking podcast, or I will hang up on you, HK, if you try to drag me down this fucking rabbit hole. But I want just anyone to ask him, what the fuck are you talking about?
Right.
Marxist or libertarian critique of all these sort of campus and culture wars, that they distract us from economics, from the real economic relationships. A Marxist would say it distracts us from inequality, a libertarian from economic growth, or how to build a more prosperous world. And I think there's something to both of those critiques, where we have this extraordinary situation where in the U.S. and the Western world as a whole, the younger generation, for the first time, is doing less well than their parents, has reduced.
But that's because you took all the money.
That's
that's literally because of wealth inequality, dude. And you are a part of that problem.
But I mean, he not only is a part of that problem, he put the fucking seed money into most of the other big parts of that problem, at least in the tech industry.
Yep.
Thinking really hard about how to fix that, how to correct that. And I think in some ways...
You correct it with taxes. That's literally how you correct it.
In these crazed battles...
That is how you correct it. There is one solution to that problem, and it is taxes.
We'll never tackle these bigger economic questions. The third one, maybe I already alluded to.
You tax the rich people and you raise the minimum wage. I guess it's two solutions to that problem.
We will never tackle these bigger economic questions. The third one, maybe I already alluded to it, where, you know, as diversity as a false god or a false idol, in some ways functions as a substitute or
diversity as a false god or a false idol.
As a false god or a false idol, in some ways functions as a substitute or distraction from, you know, from religion in the Western context, from, you know, the Judeo-Christian tradition. And if you,
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, this is ahistorical because the churches were all up in that civil rights movement, not just the black churches. He mentioned Judeo-Christian. Well, there were a lot of Jewish people out there in that fucking civil rights movement too, and they thought that their religion called upon them to be a part of this fucking movement. Like, this is not an appropriate or I don't care if it's appropriate. This is not a correct understanding of religiosity and the church in the United States.
If you read Jesus's Sermon on the Mount, it is pretty pro-diversity.
To be fair, he was just trying to recruit everybody into what was at that point a new religious group, aka a cult. But
I mean, yes, but in that vein, it was still pro-diversity.
I mean, Jim Jones was too. Honestly, it's just that, you know, Jesus, the cops killed him before he could invent Flavor Aid.
Sort of frame this a little bit polemically, but you say that you know, God is the biggest thing that we could possibly be talking about in the universe. If you're distracted from God, that has to be the biggest distraction imaginable.
Wait, I'm like 90% sure this guy's an atheist.
If you're distracted from God. Okay, so in his warped view of reality, diversity is a distraction from God.
Well, I mean, that doesn't make any sense, because if God was in charge of everything and thought the diversity was distracting, maybe he'd have made us all the same. Right? There'd be no different skin tones and facial structures and the things that we map onto and have decided our races. If God wanted our attention, maybe he'd just maybe we'd all look like the fucking people in The Handmaid's Tale or whatever. I don't know.
Well, I think God did make us all the same until we built a tower that was over like 50 feet. And then God was like, boom, you're all different now. That's why no tower has ever been built over 50 feet since then.
Is it the tower we put Rapunzel in, or is that just a completely different story?
I think Rapunzel is same tower, Tower of Babel, but different time.
Oh, okay.
She was put up there later, I think.
I mean, I was just kidding. I had
50% sure.
And so there is something very strange where I think it's distracted us from that religion, or squeezed out certain religious questions. And then, you know, the fourth dimension would be, you know, if you think of, you know, maybe science and economics and religion are in some sense more important than politics, but maybe they're also distractions from politics. And then, you know, the riff I always like to have is maybe it's just a distraction. You know, the etymology of political correctness is, you know, by the 1980s, early 90s, political correctness was a term that conservatives used to describe intolerant liberals. Go back to the 1970s, it was a term liberals used to describe themselves. If you go back to the 1950s, it actually had a very specific meaning, and it was you were a politically correct person if you were a card-carrying member of the Communist Party and you took orders directly from Stalin and in Moscow. And you just followed the party line. And I sometimes wonder whether it is it's still just a distraction from communism in the context of 2023.
Okay, so if you care about diversity at all, you're you're distracted from God and you're a communist?
Or distracted from communism.
You're distracted from communism and you're God.
Or you're a communist. Also, like, this
you're
again,
a communist God.
This again is a big problem because in the Soviet Union, a translation that translates to politically correct meant that you were a card-carrying communist and a follower of Stalin. Okay, that's fine. But that doesn't mean that that's what the translation, like that the rough translation of it necessarily means in English when it's used in English in the United States.
Well, as we've discussed previously, Peter Thiel has a difficulty understanding that words have different meanings in different contexts.
Very much so.
The CCP, and that whenever people use the word D,
and that goes back to the fact that Peter Thiel is profoundly stupid.
From communism in the context of 2023, from the CCP, and that whenever people use the word DEI, they should just think CCP. We can drill into all these a little bit more.
Yeah. In terms of science specifically, it seems...
Okay, so diversity equals communist China?
Yeah, the Chinese Communist Party. This is just... I mean, listen, this guy is getting dumber. I think, like, from the first time we watched him, because every time we've watched him, it's been like contemporaneous, right? We haven't gone back into history to watch him. It's always been like within the last month or two. And I feel like this guy's getting dumber.
I mean, I feel like that was a stretch for him.
I feel like it's making me dumber.
Like, diversity, equity, and inclusion equals communist China. That is a huge stretch.
Yeah. In terms of science specifically, it seems this is always the rebuttal. It seems like, there's a lot going on. There's like the new molecule, and there's, I don't know, rocket ships that land.
Like, even this dumbass sycophant is going to try to explain to him that things are changing.
What about science is really broken?
Well, you can always start with a meta question, which is how fast is science progressing generally? How do we measure it?
We measure it. You measure it with hindsight, usually, Peter.
Yeah, you measure it 20 years later.
If you talk to the scientists, it always gets framed in these sort of breathless terms. We are 5 years away from curing cancer.
Nuclear
string theories.
I don't recall any scientists saying that.
Understanding everything about the universe, and there's sort of all these, breathtaking developments around the corner, and maybe it's accelerating too fast. It's a dizzying pace, and we should slow it down. Those are sort of the narratives you get, and then
from
it's
who?
very hard to know how you would actually drill down into it. I'm not an expert on string theory, or what do I know about quantum computing or cancer? The argument that in a lot of these areas things are stalled and slowed is a difficult one to make, because in practice you run up against all these sort of self-congratulating experts,
or people who are doing work, who you're telling them that they suck at their job, even though you don't know anything about what they're doing.
Like, the reason that's a difficult argument to make is because you run up with constant evidence that it's untrue.
And just like, he's like, oh, these people are self-congratulatory. I don't know too many self-congratulatory people in the sciences. Like, maybe he's talking about maybe he's talking about weirdos on YouTube or some shit. And there are definitely some self-congratulatory scientists on YouTube, but one of them fucking isn't really a scientist and works for this guy and thinks he revolutionized physics. Like,
yeah, maybe he's specifically talking about Eric.
Right. Stop talking to Eric. All right. Listen, I don't like you neither, but you have a lot of money and influence. And if you just stop talking to Eric Weinstein, you could be like 0.5% less shitty over time.
These guardians guarding their narrow subdisciplines and telling us how great they are. The sense that it has slowed.
Guardians there's guarding their narrow subdisciplines. Okay, so he just means like peer review?
Or he like goes to like, I think it's like the Elon Musk thing, but for him it's in the sciences where Elon Musk, right, wanted to be a celebrity, but he went to like LA parties and New York City parties where like actual celebrities were, and they didn't like him, so now he's trying to be a celebrity for cat turd. And I think this guy suffers from the same thing, right? He's like funded innovation and he thinks all the scientists should take him seriously and they don't. So he mad. He like goes to like somebody who just won the Nobel Prize in physics. He's like, but don't you think that your field is just stalled? This motherfucker's like, this is my party for winning the Nobel Prize. What the fuck are you talking about? Go away. Why? You're an asshole. Wait, you funded my research.
Don't you think that your field has been completely stalled for the last 50 years, even though this innovation that you've been working toward just happened and like the previous guy was like competing with you to get his innovation out as well?
Right. And then all these other people who were working on this are actually here at the party congratulating you. But actually I'm right. And all these people are idiots.
Yeah. No one's done anything for the last 50 years.
It's just
quit throwing parties, damn it.
He's smoking dope and winning Nobel Prizes.
Progress is not translated into, better living standards for people. There is a sense that if we just think about, the way the world changed.
He's wrong there. They have translated into better living standards for people. The reason that life expectancy went down, which I think is what he's talking about, was COVID.
COVID and economic factors. I mean, people in basically our age cohort, white people are ending their own lives at a much higher rate than previously. And a lot of that's economic.
Yeah, mental health is not doing so well. Mental health is affected detrimentally by financial well-being. So yeah, pretty much all of the bad parts of like how things have changed in the past 40 or 50 years is because constant tax cuts to the wealthy and stagnant wages. So there's one place where he is right, where things have been completely stagnant for like 50 years, and that's wages.
My grandparents' generation from 1900 to 1980, 1990. That was a world where
we had 2 world wars. Not the best fucking time period, friend. We had fucking almost like back-to-back world wars. Those were the good old days. People got trench foot and shit trying to fucking fight in like to gain 20 feet of territory. The good old days.
it went from horse buggies to cars to, supersonic airplanes. You landed on the moon. And then the last 50 years, there's a felt sense that things have changed in computers and all these things, but almost all the other dimensions feel less that way. When I was an undergraduate,
how about medicine?
In the late 80s.
I mean, I just had literally like a month ago, I just had a knee surgery that did not exist 15 years ago. This kind of knee surgery didn't even exist 15 years ago.
Yeah, but you're not drinking the blood of the young to stay young yourself.
My appendectomy that I had 25 years ago left a big scar on my abdomen. I have a big scar from where I had my appendix out 25 years ago. And now you can have your appendix out and the scar from that surgery is in your belly button and it's like 1 millimeter long. So you can't even see it. And if you could see it, it's like barely even visible anyway. So like he's just so fucking wrong in like every aspect. 50 years ago, like planes would crash for like kind of silly reasons. And nowadays, like the planes are better.
Right. It's stunning when you find
sometimes they crash for silly reasons, but the silly reasons are much more complicated now.
Right. It's absolutely shocking, actually, when a commercial, especially a commercial airline from the U.S. crashes.
Yep.
It just doesn't happen.
Yep.
With hindsight, all the engineering fields were bad ones to go into. You didn't want to go into mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, all these things were sort of not really progressing quickly. They weren't really dynamic. Aeroastro was a bad idea. Nuclear engineering, people already knew was a very bad idea. I think electrical engineering still had a good decade or two, But the only roughly good field was computer science, which was this not very challenging field for people who weren't that good in math.
What the fuck?
What? Okay, I'm like thoroughly convinced that this guy has never worked on anything.
He turns $1 into 10 like magic, and that's it.
Like he just knows who to give his current money to so that they give him more money later. That's his one talent.
I always have this riff where things that call themselves science are fields with an inferiority complex. And so computer science was sort of like climate science or political science. It was not a science at all. And then that turned out to be adjacent to the internet and this one sector that was going to boom in the next 30 years. Yeah, all the hardcore.
So the area of science that he thinks is the dumbest, because he thinks so, because I guess they're bad at math, is the area of science that has provided his economic prosperity.
And by the way, software engineers, like especially the low-level software engineers, have to be pretty good at math. That's why, like, you're required for a software engineering degree, you're required to take at least Calc 2.
Right, and also most software engineers are not computer scientists.
Correct. Yeah, computer scientists is what I mean. Like, software engineers oftentimes have a computer science degree, but computer scientists who actually work on like the science behind computers basically always have like higher level math training.
This is really weird.
You can't really do computer science without it.
Again, it just sounds like you've been talking to Eric Weinstein, right? Eric Weinstein's like, those people aren't that good at math. Did they solve the universe? I don't think so.
Engineering fields went haywire. You know, there was the Founders Fund, soundbite riff we had on our manifesto, back in 2011. They promised us flying cars. All we got was 140 characters. And so there is some sense that we
those
don't
are
have quite.
Whoever they is that promised us the flying cars. I think that's called the Jetsons. And that was a cartoon. Flying cars are a problem because, like if your car breaks down, well, sure, maybe your wheels lock up and you have a little bit of a scare, right? But what if you're 500 feet above the what if you're 500 feet above the surface of the earth and your car breaks down? Well, then you're dead.
You crash into someone's living room and probably kill yourself and them.
Right. So, the technology, in fact, there are versions of flight. What the fuck does he think an airplane is?
Or a helicopter or a gyrocopter. There are essentially like drones now that you could absolutely use as like personal transportation. The problem is like you need a pilot license to use them. And like no one's going to get a pilot license to go like 30 minutes to work.
Right.
Rather than like 50 minutes to work on the freeway.
And just the amount of energy, like think about like, the weight of your body plus all the mechanics and the amount of energy it just takes to lift it off the ground just makes it fucking suck up a bunch of energy that could just be used to propel you forward. Right. Like seems.
Yeah. Fuel in any aircraft will be higher cost and higher use and higher emissions than fuel in an equivalent vehicle, land vehicle.
Right. And that, you stuff a bunch of people on a plane and that's fine. The difference is negligible, but yeah, they'd be more efficient on a train, assuming that the train was modern and had efficient components or whatever. Absolutely.
Yep.
The Jetsons are Back to the Future.
Well, we had 280 characters.
Wait, the car in Back to the Future, I don't think it flew until like the third Back to the Future. I think in the first one, all it did was go 80 and then leave fire behind it, which seems unsafe on the ground even.
You can post entire essays on Twitter.
Sure, and of course it's
progress.
It's complicated. There are ways, and there are ways Twitter is important culturally and politically, and there are ways.
No, there aren't.
It's a
Twitter's not important at all.
Business, and then there's probably still some sense where that by itself is not enough to take our civilization to the next level.
But is your sense on the college campus something happened that...
Is anyone making the argument that it's going to be Twitter that takes our civilization to the next level?
Man, I don't know. That's really interesting. I don't. Maybe I think at the core of this is that he's just mad that he's not treated like a scientist or something. I don't know. This again, we've been doing a pretty good job of not going all the way down this fucking rabbit hole again. He's trying to take us there. Peter's like, no. Nope. Dave and HK, I came on a smaller show than yours. Come down the rabbit hole with me.
Progress in the sciences.
Certainly sort of the basic research part of science, the hardcore part of science, was, in some ways, and it was not all on campuses, but a lot of it was adjacent to the universities. There were government programs. There were some large corporations that were funding it, and something started to go wrong in that culture, in the 70s and 80s, and it was hard to see at the time. It's sort of more obvious in retrospect. It became bureaucratized. There was something about the peer review process where people couldn't do breakthrough science. There was probably
no. The peer review process is there to verify that what you've done is breakthrough science. You dumb fuck. It's not there to tell you. It's not there to tell. No. You can't do breakthrough science. It's there to ostensibly to help you and show you oh, this does seem good, but here, I found this. It seems like maybe you might want to. We're gonna have to examine this part of your process and whatnot. It's like peer review. That's the thing, is this guy doesn't think he has any peers, I think. So he's really just mad at the concept.
Peer review is essentially there so that scientists aren't subjected to just a fire hose of shitty studies.
Right. You can check the peer review if you're like, this study seems interesting, and you're like, oh, never mind. More. And it's always just more research is needed, and that's fine.
Well, a peer review is often like a back and forth. Basically, you'll submit your paper for peer review, and you'll get these are the things that need to be improved in your paper if it's going to be published. And a lot of times it doesn't end up getting published because it's just not good enough. And a lot of times it is changed. Sometimes even significantly changed, and then it is published. So peer review is just weeding out the bad quality papers before they reach publication. And the publication is ostensibly for other scientists to read. So other scientists aren't going to want to hear about literally every study, no matter how garbage it is.
something about the signature achievements at Los Alamos and Apollo had this sort of military thing. So if the smartest people in the world are the physicists and they're just going to build bombs to blow up the world, maybe it's better if they spend their lives puttering around with DEI grants.
Get the fuck out of here. So the way he talks about Los Alamos, right? It was the atomic bomb. He talks about that like people were just they just decided one day that we could maybe harness the atom to create energy or a bomb. That it just somebody came up with it one day, right? And they're like, oh shit, we should do this at Los Alamos. That's not how that happened. People had been working on similar stuff for quite some time. Or nobody would have known to try it. What does he think is going on?
Yeah, basically it went from theory to practice at Los Alamos. It's not the idea didn't exist before that. They weren't there to come up with the idea of a big bomb. They were there to actualize the idea of a big bomb.
Sort of seems kind of pathetic, but at least they're not going to blow up the world. And so I think, I think there's some way that it's overdetermined. There were a lot of different things that went wrong, but I think it generally slowed down a lot.
In the 80s, I mean, you mentioned the exception to that general trend, which was computer science and the inferiority complex and all of that. What exactly is the reason for that? Is it just the absence of the other science department pressures, or maybe the degree didn't matter at all? And I mean, the sciences, I guess the tech was built outside of academia completely.
If it's the kind of thing where you don't need a PhD, let's say, you don't need a postdoctoral degree or a PhD, then it's the kind of thing where you can get to the frontier pretty quickly. And then once you're at the frontier, you can start doing new things. And so, yeah, if you're, Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, you can drop out of college your sophomore year, and you know enough computer science to start building a great company in those spaces. And then probably, a lot of the other
Both of those people had rich parents, but never mind that.
fields, even something like biotech.
Also, both of those people owe much more of their success to how good they were at buying other products and marketing them better than the current people who owned them.
Early 90s, which was one of the things I thought of going into at first. It already had this very elongated thing where,
Which, as you can imagine, is pretty much how Peter Thiel made his money.
Late 80s, early 90s, which was one of the things I thought of going into at first. It already had this very elongated thing where, you needed to at least get a PhD to have sort of a basic entry-level credential. And that was maybe, in some ways, a symptom of a field where the frontier was very far away. And then, once you got to this frontier, maybe it turned out not as much was happening there as advertised.
Would it seem to you that college still is not really playing much of a role in development, let's say in technology rather than science? So, for example, computer sciences. It does seem like more people are getting this degree. It's still the only real outlier, it seems like, in our economy. Now there's artificial intelligence.
That's a subset of computer science.
Yeah.
It is. Yes, it is a subset of, but not everyone working in that field has a PhD in computer science. These things are actually pretty fucking complicated, and lots of different people with lots of different core competencies are working together at companies, mostly companies now, on this stuff. So what's the problem?
There's still a lot of academics working in
Right.
AI.
Right. Well, I guess the things that are like public facing tend to be from companies, but that's because they want to market them and make money. And maybe my view is a little bit biased by that because I don't actually know what's going on in academia and computer science, right? But I do know that like not everyone working on this stuff has a PhD in computer science. It would be foolish to think that everyone working on this stuff does.
There's certainly a lot of like undergrads working on it.
But there are also people like working on this stuff who computer science isn't even their background, like their academic background. That's what I like.
Yep.
As Hillary Clinton said, it takes a village or whatever.
Trends sort of kept that you don't really need a PhD to progress in the field.
I think it's certainly maintained for all the fields outside of computer science, where I think in the 1980s it was not clear that the college thing was not working. When I was an undergraduate at Stanford, I would say 2/3 of the students ended up in consulting, law, medicine, or investment banking. And
but that's what Stanford was known for. Like, sure that they had the famous like computer science lab there, but Stanford in like the private sector was known for spitting out MBAs, like MBAs and like stockbrokers. That's just what it was known for. I don't know what else to tell him. He should have done that.
Medicine, you get an MD. Law, you get a JD. Banking, you get an MBA. So it's sort of these professional post-undergraduate degrees. And probably all of those things have decayed quite a bit.
What?
Hardcore science and engineering fields have decayed a lot more. I think
what does he mean when he says hardcore science and engineering fields? Like, is there? I don't understand.
What does he mean decayed? Does he mean the quality of the education has decayed or the field itself has decayed?
I have no idea.
And what does he mean by decayed?
This might be as good a place as any to fucking put a fork in this one. Because like this is the same shit every interview with this guy, and I'm putting a fork in this. We're not watching the rest of this during the post game. But
oh no, we'll miss out on all that great content.
So I kind of think what's going on here, and I keep bringing up Eric Weinstein, but I think it's important. What's going on here is this guy has so much money that he can pretty much interject himself into kind of whatever sort of ivory tower situation he wants to, except for the sciences, and like, because they don't care. Fucking somebody working on like some project that we don't understand at some physics department somewhere at some university doesn't give a fuck what Peter Thiel says. And I don't think he likes that.
Yep. You can't buy yourself a Nobel Prize.
Well, I'm sure people have greased the palms over there a little bit, right? But you know, it's the same, Eric, the same way. The people doing the work don't give a fuck what Eric thinks either. And they're the way that these two guys, the way that him and Eric Weinstein talk about academia, specifically the sciences, strikes me as a bunch of fucking sour grapes.
Yep, I think you're right.
Right, because this
I think
guy
you are hitting the nail right on the head.
This guy could go to a business symposium. He doesn't have an MBA, but they'll give him a fucking keynote, right?
Yep.
If he goes to a business symposium, goes to some software, software engineering thing. I don't know if he's a coder or not. I think he may or may not have a background in that, but that's not his current profession or his core competency. But he'll get a keynote there. But if he goes to like a chemistry thing, they'd be like, oh, "Do you have a ticket?" Right. Right. Oh, you can buy a ticket now. We heard you have money.
Yep. Oh, you want to speak? No.
No.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, this is a chemistry. This is a place where chemists are.
You need to do chemistry to speak here.
Right, and I think that that's the problem. I think that that's the fucking even the field of like jet propulsion or whatever. Sure, Elon Musk bought a company, but if there's like a some conference that Elon himself didn't throw about jet propulsion, Elon's not getting a speaking gig there. And Peter Thiel's not getting a speaking gig there. And I think that they don't like that. I really think that that's the thing. They don't like that those doors are not open to them through their wealth. That is like the one area of our society that sure they can throw their money around and throw their influence around in some ways, but not in the way that they want to, not in a way that makes everyone clap.
You know what? I think Peter Thiel specifically should really start thinking about getting into designing deep sea submersibles himself.
Better yet, he should pay Eric to make it.
There we go. Yeah, they could both take it for a ride. Perfect.
Oh man, I think we're gonna have to put this guy on academic probation for about 6 months. So we can run clips of him, but we're not going to run any more long form Peter Thiel, because it's the same thing with Brett and Heather, right? Where it's very repetitive. We end up like in that case, if somebody caught this for the first time, this episode, they're like, why are they not talking about exactly why they think he's wrong? Both of these people, they look into a little bit, maybe check your CV, and they're like, oh, one of them's actually a working software engineer with his own company. The other one claims to have worked in technology, but I don't know. He just seems like a dumb talk show host to me, but you'd think he'd have some kind of take on this. And like, but it's because this would be like the fifth fucking time we had the same conversation about how this guy's like view of the marching on of technology just isn't right. It isn't clear. It doesn't make any sense. And with that, I'm going to read the show out. This has been the Intellectual Dollar Tree. The show's live on Twitch every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific. And this is Boomers by Periscope. We'll see everybody in the post game.
Should your pay